guys, Mapletail here. It's Mermay, the month-long mermaid art drawing challenge. I save most of my art challenge energy for Pride Month and Catember, but I always do like to draw at least one mermaid in May. And this is that mermaid. Let's get into it. I decided to draw a bit of an AU of an AU, the Baldur's Gate 3 version of my original story OC, Hemera, but as a mermaid. I just really like their Baldur's Gate design, and I wanted an excuse to draw them again. I also took this opportunity to continue my OC Lore and Stories series, to talk a bit about Hemera's story in my original world. Hemera was born to the Starshades on the Isle of Autumn and Spring 20 years ago from what I consider the present day. The island is to the south of the land of Florin, past the far southern jungle. They lived with mothers Kafel and Nightingale, and sisters Nyx and Aether, whom are triplets with Hemera. The family is based on Asian golden cats, medium-sized wildcats. The Starshades come from a long line of priests on the island, and Kafel was hard set on her children continuing the legacy. She had the most trouble with Hemera in that regard. Nightingale, and especially Kafel, were strict parents, bordering into cruel and highly traditional, which did not mesh well with Hemera's rebellious free-spirit personality. Throughout their childhood, Hemera would sneak away to read forbidden books of the world outside their secluded island. The founder of the village, Fione Starshade, had dealt with great strife 1,000 years ago before coming to the island, and wanted it to be a place of safety and peace, cut off from the land of Florin. Hemera would tell Nyx of all the interesting things they learned from their research, being the most fascinated by the fire mages of the southern desert of Florin, and shared in their want to see the world. When Aether discovered the forbidden reading and plans, she went straight to their mothers. Hemera and Nyx were both severely punished, which only pushed Hemera further away from their family, and a huge rift appeared between Aether and her siblings after such a betrayal. The betrayal was born, at least partially, out of jealousy. Going all the way back to Fione, the Starshade family had been blessed with vitiligo and highly valued it. Unlike her siblings, Aether was born without it, making her feel as though she had to try extra hard to win her parents' approval. When the siblings turned 18, Hemera and Nyx ran away from the Isle of Autumn and Spring, and headed north towards the desert. They found the temple of the fire god Seraphina, hoping to gain her favor. Seraphina admired Hemera's anger and ambition, and granted the siblings fire magic. She went even further and made Hemera her chosen, granting them fiery powers that far exceeded most blessed by her. The two were both very excited by the development, but also found themselves missing the sea. On their travels to the coast, they chose a new last name to go by, Moonfall, and ended up meeting the pirate crew of the Silver Crow. The captain, Malat Bennett, was impressed by the twins' fire powers and offered them a place on her crew of mermaid hunters, to which they gladly accepted. They were taken under the wing of first mate Ea Swanhild, who became something of a parent to them. Tough, but not cruel like Kafel and Nightingale had been. Hemera became the crew's weapons expert, while Nyx trained to be their medic, wanting to use her powers to heal rather than harm. On their 19th birthday, the siblings were able to summon familiars as part of their mage abilities, Hemera summoning a violet crow called Eclipse, and Nyx summoning a golden cat called Butters. Another year went by. When the Silver Crow was docked on Florin, Hemera was met with an unfortunately familiar face, Aether. She now had a child of her own, Azir, and begged Hemera and Nyx to take him, seeing the true depth of their mother's cruelty now that she was older and had a child of her own, and not wanting her son to suffer from it as they had. While Hemera was reluctant, Nyx agreed to raise the baby with her partner Eve Crestfallen. The family continued pirating for the next 8 years, when another incident happened while docking at Florin, this time at the desert port. Hemera was grabbed by a couple desert guards and taken to the Desert Kingdom, straight to former king Taz Crestfall. Hemera gathered through various conversations that the Desert Queens, Taiga and Red, and their son Hama, had mysteriously disappeared. And now Taiga's retired parents were scrambling to find a new viable heir. Their other daughter, Sahara, and granddaughter Maxine had long since refused. So Taz and former Queen Aurora were looking for their illegitimate children as a last resort. Aurora had failed to find daughter Marina Jolene, who she'd given up to her Blue Kingdom father many years ago. Taz never met the child that he fathered with a Desert Kingdom woman called Est Bray, so the only information that the guards had to work with was that the child would be about 30, had left to travel on the Silver Crow, and that the mother had violet hair. So they grabbed the first 30-something that they found and fit the description, which was Hamera. Hamera pieced together pretty quickly that who they were actually looking for was Eve, but kept their mouth shut to protect their sister's family, which is how Hamera Moonfall became Hamera Crestfall for a time and was crowned King of the Desert Kingdom. They managed to get fellow crew member and friend Silvo Coast as their retainer, and the two strategized for how to get away without having the kingdom come after them. The plan was to get Hamera married and have an heir ASAP, so the kingdom would have no need to chase them down. They managed it in 10 months, leaving the kingdom in good hands with Queen Amber and Princess Maureen. Hamera and Silvo were then able to return to the crew and were much more careful about docking at the desert port in the future. 12 years passed. The Silver Crow was at war with the crew of the Blooming Dusk, another pirate ship that they've held a long-standing and bitter rivalry with. The crews have very different goals and values, and there have been far too many deaths at each other's hands to end up anywhere except a brutal, all-out, and final battle. Mermaid hunters and mermaid lovers do not mesh well. More deaths occurred in this fight, most notably that of Nehru Isla by Hamera's blade in an attempt to defend Nyx, who had been attacked by Nehru's leopard Cypress when Nyx had tried to grab young mermaid Melody Isla Keel. Hamera was able to get a badly injured Nyx to safety, and after the battle, Nyx had to walk Hamera through amputating her hand, which was beyond saving. After Nyx was all patched up, Hamera gifted their sister their extra Chosen One powers so Nyx could use them to summon a prosthetic hand of light at will. Captain Malat was also lost in the battle, being succeeded by Alouette Swanhild. It would be 3 more years until the Silver Crew had another run-in with the Blooming Dusk. Both crews were seeking shelter from a terrible storm on the same small abandoned island. They shared a run-down mansion in tense silence. Hamera received many glares from the other pirates for taking away their beloved first mate Nehru. The tension was broken when the crew of the Sanctuary, another ship crewed by Guardian shapeshifters, used the pirates' vulnerability in the storm to launch a massive attack on them. While the Silver Crow had had a focus on hunting mermaids under Malat's command, the Sanctuary was on a mission of hunting Nightfangs, aka vampires, which the Blooming Dusk, and the Silver Crow to a lesser extent, were full of. The two crews were forced to work together to fend off the attackers, and were successful for now, but it was only a matter of time before the Sanctuary tried something again. The crews agreed to travel together to the island of Lycanthia, where an expert on shapeshifters lived. Said expert, Altair Plenilune, paired the crews off so they had to figure out how to properly work together and put past grievances behind them. Hamera was paired with the weapons expert of the Blooming Dusk, Laurelyn Zuri, much to both of their displeasure. Them working together nearly ended in bloodshed as they argued over Nehru's death and Nyx's injury. But they were interrupted by Avon Swale of the Blooming Dusk and Azir, who had been paired together. The younger crewmates were able to dispel some of the tension by their presence alone. As they left, Hamera admitted to Laurelyn that they hadn't meant to kill anyone. They just couldn't stand by while their sister was hurt. Laurelyn could respect that much at least. The next time the Sanctuary attacked the Blooming Dusk, the Silver Crew was ready and laying in wait, and both crews were able to take on their common enemy head-on. The Sanctuary was loaded with explosives meant to destroy the Blooming Dusk, but they hadn't been anticipating the Silver Crow and their fire mages in Hamera and Nyx. A stray spark was all it took to ignite the Sanctuary in a massive explosion, badly damaging the Silver Crow and Blooming Dusk as well. Luckily, most of the pirates were a fair distance away from the center of the explosion. Hamera was not, as it was their flames that started the blast. Along with bad burns to their chest, they were flung into the ocean, where they surely would have drowned, if not for Laurelyn, who ended up in the water nearby. Laurelyn put aside her feelings about what Hamera did and held them above the waves. When Hamera regained enough awareness to understand what had happened, they panicked, needing to make sure that their sister was safe, but unable to with such injuries. They demanded that Laurelyn do something about it. As Laurelyn was one of the Blooming Dusk's Nightfangs, she could. She cursed Hamera at their request, holding them as their body healed itself. Upon awakening, they were able to find Nyx no worse for wear. Hemera was relieved, but the weight of what had just happened hit them. Becoming a Night Fang had locked them in their current state, severing their control over fire, a childhood dream dying with them. Both crews traveled to the port of the far southern desert for repairs, as Hemera, with the help of their family and Laurelin, adjusted to their new reality. A year passed. Back on the island of Autumn and Spring, the Starshade still only had Aether to carry on the family line, and she hadn't had any more children. Kafel had been sending out scouts to find Nyx and Hemera, and they found the siblings at the worst possible time. Nyx and Eve had decided to have a baby with the help of a donor, and Nyx had just given birth to baby Solstice Moonfallen at the jungle port when they, Hemera, Azir, and Medic Hen Starrun of the Blooming Dusk, were ambushed. All 6 of them were apprehended and brought to the Starshade home. Hemera had to face their mothers for the first time in 28 years. With the help of Aether, her, Hemera, and Nyx were all able to confront Kafel, the siblings all on the same side for the first time in decades. The realization that Kafel had lost all she'd worked for, her family line, her legacy, was all too much for her old heart to take. Literally, as she died from a heart attack. Nyx tried to save her, much to Hemera's disdain, but there was nothing to be done. The triplets were finally free of Kafel's tyranny, and of the inflexible life they had been born into. Not long after, Nyx asked Hemera to curse her, and Eve too, not wanting to have any more children with this bloodline, and so that they could sail the world together forever. Thanks for watching! Hemera is near and dear to my heart, as you might be able to tell. They were originally from a separate story, but I couldn't stand to leave them behind when I brought Nyx over to the Blue Kingdom too. I hope you enjoyed a little drawing for Mermay and a big lore dump from me. Next week, we will be diving into my Pride Month Warrior series, so keep an eye out for that if you want to see some gay cats. And after that, I should finally be able to talk about all the Warriors news that's been dropping recently. I feel like this happened last year too. We got a bunch of news right before June, and then I couldn't talk about it for a month. But I'm excited to talk about it when I can. Anyways, I'll see you next Thursday.